Are you saying you lost the custody hearing because a black child spoke out? Yes, Your Honor. And I'm telling you that boy saved my daughter's life. Rain hit the windows of the family court of New York like fists on glass, muffling the raised voices in courtroom 3C. Inside, a bitter custody battle played out like a cruel stage play, every word weaponized, every silence louder than a scream. At the center of it stood a girl too scared to speak and a boy who was never meant to be there. His name was Elijah Monroe. 10 years old, 5th grade, too small for his age, and too smart for his own good. At least that's what the teachers whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. Elijah had no business being in a courtroom that day. He was supposed to be at PS 137, drawing cartoon dogs and complaining about cafeteria pizza. But Elijah had seen something no one else did, and he decided it was time someone listened. On the surface, it was a case like many others. A white woman named Chelsea Drayton and her ex-husband Marcus Bell, a black man from East Flatbush, were locked in a brutal fight for custody of their 8-year-old daughter, Harper. Both sides were armed with lawyers, affidavits, and a cold, performative concern for the best interest of the child. Chelsea had money, charm, and an airbrushed narrative. A concerned mother protecting her daughter from a violent man with anger issues. Marcus had history stacked against Hyman arrest when he was 19 for resisting police, a deep baritone voice that intimidated without trying, and the curse of being black in a system that already assumed the worst of him. The judge, Honorable Maria Soto, was known for her firm stare and neutral tone. But even she couldn't ignore the racial current rippling beneath the surface of every testimony. Words like unstable, aggressive, and unfit floated through the courtroom like poisoned darts all aimed at Marcus. Marcus had fought hard. He brought character witnesses, showed pay stubs, proved he hadn't missed a single weekend visit. But the tide was shifting. Chelsea's lawyer, a polished man named Bennett Sharp, smiled every time Marcus raised his voice. It was theater, a trap, and Marcus Raw, real, passionate, kept falling into it. And then Elijah stood up. No one had noticed him slip into the back row of the courtroom. He was just a kid in a hoodie, no tie, no parent, no explanation. But when he stood shaky knees, clenched fists, every head turned. "Excuse me," he said. "I need to say something." The bailiff moved toward him. Judge Soto held up her hand. "Who are you, young man?" "I'm Elijah Monroe. I live across the hall from Mr. Marcus." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "I know Harper, and I know what's really happening." Chelsea paled. Bennett Sharp rose, objecting loudly. "Your Honor, this child is not a party to the case. This is highly inappropriate." Judge Soto waved him down. "Sit down, Mr. Sharp. Let's hear what he has to say." Elijah looked at the ground, then up at the judge. "Harper told me stuff, things she wasn't supposed to say. She said her mom a mess. Drayton makes her lie, makes her say her dad yells when he doesn't, that he hits her when he really doesn't. She said Ms. Drayton told her if she doesn't lie, she'll take away her stuffed bunny and lock her in the bathroom again." Gasps scattered across the room like gunfire. Chelsea stood. "That's a lie. That child is lying. He's not even supposed to be here." Elijah had turned to her, eyes burning. "You called me a roach when you thought I was asleep on the couch. You said my mom was trash from the projects. You said Marcus only wanted Harper so he could make her another ghetto statistic. I heard you." The courtroom fell into a suffocating silence. Judge Soto leaned forward. "Elijah, why are you here today?" Elijah swallowed. "Because no one believes people like Mr. Marcus. Just like they didn't believe my dad. And I couldn't let it happen again." The judge stared at him, then at the lawyers, then at the girl sitting in the corner, too afraid to speak. Her lip trembled. Her fingers twisted the hem of her pink sweater. And for the first time that morning, Harper nodded. Chelsea screamed something incoherent. The bailiff intervened. The hearing paused. An emergency recess was called. Harper was taken to speak privately with a child psychologist. Elijah was escorted out, but not before Marcus knelt beside him and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you, little man." Later, in chambers, Judge Soto asked the psychologist what Harper had said. She confirmed everything. The psychologist replied, "Grim," and more. For the first time in weeks, Marcus Bell smiled. But the aftermath wasn't simple. The court couldn't rely solely on a child's testimony, especially one who wasn't officially involved in the case. An investigation was launched. Social services visited both homes. But a crack had formed in Chelsea's flawless narrative, and through it came the light. Old complaints from former nannies surfaced. Emails, voicemails, evidence buried beneath the assumption that a wealthy white mother couldn't possibly be abusive. Slowly, the mask crumbled. Meanwhile, Elijah returned to his life, though nothing felt normal anymore. His mom, a nurse who worked nights, hugged him tighter than usual. Strangers from the building called him brave. His teacher asked him to write an essay about truth and courage. He wrote about Harper, about fear, about how truth doesn't wear a necktie and sometimes comes from the smallest voice in the room. Weeks later, the verdict came. Custody granted Salito Marcus Bell. The judge's written opinion stunned everyone. "It is the opinion of this court," Judge Soto wrote, "that race, while unspoken, influenced perception throughout this case. The assumptions levied against Mr. Bell were not grounded in fact, but in prejudice. We must confront the discomforting truth that this still exists even in this courtroom." That day, Marcus held Harper's hand in one, and Elijah's in the other. And somewhere in the back, behind all the headlines, the cameras, and the applause, a small boy smiled to himself. Because someone finally listened. The media swarmed outside the courthouse like flies to sugar. Every headline turned Elijah Monroe into a symbol. 10-year-old hero exposes custody lie. Boy's testimony reveals systemic racism in court. News anchors praised his courage. Talk shows debated the implications. But Elijah didn't care about any of that. Fame wasn't why he spoke up. He had only wanted Harper to be safe and, for someone, anyone, to believe what kids like them knew but couldn't prove. Inside their apartment in East Flatbush, the curtains were drawn tight. Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor, watching reruns of Static Shock, pretending the world hadn't changed overnight. His mother, Kenya Monroe, paced the living room on the phone with reporters, lawyers, even someone from the mayor's office. "No, he's not available for interviews. He's 10. 10. He still wets the bed sometimes and hides his vegetables in his shoes. He's not your next damn viral mascot." When she hung up, she leaned against the wall, exhausted. Her son turned to look at her with worried eyes. "I messed up, didn't I?" Kenya crouched beside him, held his face in both hands. "No, baby. You did the right thing. That don't mean it'll be easy, but you did what grown people couldn't." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then why does it feel like everything's harder now?" She didn't have an answer, just kissed his forehead and whispered, "'Cause it is." Meanwhile, Harper adjusted to her new life in Marcus's small but warm apartment. No marble countertops or walk-in closets, just a second-hand bunk bed, stacks of bedtime books, and a dad who didn't care if she cried herself to sleep as long as she knew he'd be there in the morning. At first, Harper barely spoke. Her therapist called it protective silence, a defense after too much manipulation. Marcus didn't push. He just made blueberry pancakes on Saturdays and let her sleep with the hallway light on. One night, she finally whispered, "Daddy." He turned so fast his neck popped. "Yeah, baby. I used to think I was bad, 'cause Mommy said I made her sad all the time." Marcus knelt beside her bed, hands trembling. "Harper, no. You're not bad. You are good. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. She nodded once and reached for his hand. Okay. The next morning, she told him she wanted to visit Elijah. When Harper and Marcus arrived at the Monroe apartment, Kenya had just finished a 12-hour shift. Still in scrubs, she opened the door, blinking back surprise, and maybe tears at the sight of the girl clutching a hand-drawn thank you card. The two kids sat on a fire escape together, trading gummy worms and Pokemon cards like nothing had happened. Elijah looked sideways at her, fidgeting. You okay now? Harper nodded. It's still scary sometimes, but I sleep better now. You? Elijah smiled. I still hate courtrooms, and microphones, and adults that smell like lemon-scented lies. Harper laughed, then got quiet. You really heard all that stuff my mom said? Elijah's expression darkened, but he nodded. Yeah, I did. She blinked. I'm sorry. He looked at her, confused. Why are you sorry? I never wanted anyone to get hurt. But now I know. I was hurt. And so were you. Elijah looked out over the street, at the cracks in the sidewalk, at the rust on the fire escape. They think we're just kids, he said softly. But we see everything. As weeks turned into months, the system slow to admit its mistakes quietly scrambled to update procedures. Family court judges across New York were ordered to attend racial bias training. Child psychologists began sitting in on more custody cases. One senator even proposed Elijah's Law, a policy that would give more weight to third-party minors in custody proceedings, provided they had first-hand knowledge. But none of that changed the nights Elijah lay awake wondering if someone would come for him. Not with kindness or gratitude, but with anger. Retaliation. One Saturday, as Elijah and his mom walked home from the bodega, a white man in a gray BMW slowed beside them. Kenya tensed immediately. You that kid? The man said. From a news? Elijah didn't answer. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know you ruined that woman's life, right? She was a good mother. You people always play the victim, don't you? Kenya stepped in front of her son like a shield. You got 10 seconds to get your entitled ass out of here, or I swear to God. He peeled off, tires screeching. Elijah stood frozen. Kenya hugged him tight. Don't you ever let people like that make you question what's right. Elijah didn't cry. Not then. Not until later that night, when the lights were off in the city, sounds outside felt like they were pressing in through the windows. At school, the attention was even more exhausting. Some kids treated him like a celebrity. Others whispered he was a liar. One boy tripped him on purpose and shouted, Bet your lawyer mama can't sue me for that. Elijah bit back tears, bit his tongue. One teacher, Mrs. Grayson, pulled him aside after class. You okay, Elijah? He hesitated, then said the most honest thing he could. I don't know. I think being brave makes people expect you to be brave all the time. But I'm tired, Mrs. Grayson. I'm so tired. She crouched beside him, her voice gentle. You don't always have to be brave. You just have to be true. That night, he wrote those words on a sticky note and taped it to his wall. You just have to be true. Meanwhile, Chelsea Drayton's world collapsed. Her appeals failed. Her supporters vanished. She was indicted for perjury and child endangerment. But even then, she played victim. On a morning news show, she told a reporter that child Elijah was manipulated, coached. This is all political. But the public didn't buy it. Her face faded from the screens. Her name lost power. What lingered wasn't her fall but Elijah's voice. At a community town hall on racial justice, Kenya finally agreed to let Elijah speak. He stood on stage, too small for the podium, reading from a crumpled sheet of paper. My name is Elijah Monroe. I'm 10. I used to think grown-ups always knew best, that they'd protect us. But sometimes grown-ups lie. Sometimes the system lies. I'm not here 'cause I wanted attention. I'm here 'cause a little girl was hurting, and no one would listen. He looked up, voice shaking. I still get scared, but I'd do it all again. 'Cause the truth matters, even if it comes from someone little. The crowd stood, applauded. Kenya cried in the front row. And Harper, watching from home, whispered, "Thank you." Autumn came early that year. Leaves died slow and brilliant on the sidewalks, and with them fell the last remnants of the world Elijah once knew. It was strange how fast everything could change when the truth clawed its way into the open. And yet, some things remained the same. Elijah still had homework, still argued with his mom over screen time, still got nervous before spelling tests. But deep inside, something had shifted, a new awareness, heavy and permanent, like the weight of a secret no child should carry but did. And that weight kept growing. 3 weeks after his town hall speech, someone smashed the window of their apartment building lobby. The glass scattered across the mailroom like broken teeth. Spray painted on the wall were 3 words in thick red slashes: "Stay in line." The super cleaned it up fast. Police came, asked routine questions, filled out the paperwork. Nothing came of it. But Elijah didn't sleep that night. Neither did Kenya. She kept the bat by her bed and the chain on the door just in case. She didn't let Elijah walk alone for weeks. "I don't regret what you did," she whispered once, her voice trembling as she stroked his hair. "But I'm scared, baby. I'm scared the world sees you now and not all of its cheering." Elijah didn't answer. He was afraid too, not just of the threats, but of being wrong. What if he had ruined someone's life? What if Chelsea's words, twisted and venomous, were still echoing somewhere deep inside him? He needed answers, closure, something no adult seemed able to give. So he went looking for it himself. It took 2 months of stolen time in the school library, whisper-quiet Google searches, and eavesdrop conversations between adults. But one day, Elijah found the name of the social worker who had handled Harper's post-custody assessment, Jasmine Kulkarni. He wrote her a letter. "Dear Ms. Jasmine, my name is Elijah Monroe. I was the boy who spoke up in Harper Bell's custody case. I don't know if what I did helped or made things worse, but I need to understand what happened after. I need to know if Harper's okay. I need to know if telling the truth really worked. I know you probably can't say much, but maybe you can say something. Thank you, Elijah." He dropped the envelope into a mailbox with shaking hands, then waited. 1 week passed, then 2. On the 15th day, he got a response. "Dear Elijah, thank you for your letter. I remember you very well. What you did changed the outcome of the case. Yes, but it also changed the way we look at cases. It reminded us that children notice everything, that the loudest voices aren't always the right ones. Harper is safe. She's adjusting well. She mentions you often. And yes, telling the truth helped. Even if the world doesn't always clap when you do the right thing, you still did it. And it mattered. Keep being brave. Jasmine K." Elijah read that note 5 times. Then he read it again to his mom. She didn't say anything for a long time, just pulled him close, hugged him harder than he could ever remember. That night, Elijah slept deeply for the first time in months. But the story didn't end there, because systems don't heal with a single ruling, and racism doesn't retreat after one courtroom is silenced. In January, a local news station ran a feature titled, "Elijah's Law. Where is it now?" The proposed legislation had stalled. Committee hearings kept getting rescheduled. Lawmakers were hesitant. Too controversial, too political, too uncomfortable. So Kenya started organizing. What began as a Facebook post turned into a movement. Parents rallied. Teachers wrote letters. Elijah recorded a video for the city council, short and powerful. "If I was old enough to see the truth, you're old enough to vote for it." The video went viral. Suddenly, the same officials who ignored the bill were tripping over themselves to support it. Public pressure mounted. Community organizers used Elijah's case as a rallying cry. And finally, in early spring, Elijah's law passed in New York City. It included provisions for allowing minor third-party witnesses to be heard in family court under protective conditions, requiring cultural sensitivity training for all family court staff, creating a child advocacy panel to review past custody decisions where racial bias may have played a role. Elijah was invited to the signing ceremony. He wore a too-big blazer and borrowed shoes. The mayor shook his hand and whispered, "You made history, kid." But Elijah didn't care about handshakes or headlines. What mattered was Harper safe, loved. What mattered was that maybe, just maybe, some other kid in some other courtroom might be heard now. At the podium, he didn't give a speech. Just 6 words spoken into a silent room. "Please listen to kids like me." The crowd erupted. Weeks later, Marcus brought Harper to Elijah's school to surprise him during lunch. She was taller now, more confident. Her hair was braided neatly. She handed him a small box, wrapped in old comics. Elijah opened it to find a worn stuffed bunny, Harper's favorite, the one Chelsea had once threatened to take away. "I want you to have her," she said. Elijah blinked. "You sure?" "She helped me stay brave. Maybe now she can help you." He held the bunny like it was gold. They sat at the edge of the playground, the noise of laughing kids around them like static. Elijah turned to Harper. "Do you think people will stop lying one day?" Harper shrugged. "I think they'll just lie quieter. But maybe someone will still hear it," he said. She nodded. "Like you did." He smiled. Later that afternoon, as Elijah walked home with the bunny peeking out his backpack, he passed a group of kids teasing another boy for his stutter. Without thinking, Elijah stepped in. "Yo, back off. He's talking just fine." The bullies blinked, backed away. The boy, maybe 8 years old, looked at Elijah like he was made of lightning. "You okay?" Elijah asked. The boy nodded, tears brimming. "Thanks." Elijah smiled again. And somewhere deep inside, something settled. Something healed. Because telling the truth didn't just change the courtroom. It had changed him. Spring turned to summer, and with it came a rare kind of peace. The kind that doesn't announce itself with trumpets or headlines, but settles quietly into the bones. Elijah Monroe, once the boy who interrupted a courtroom, was now the boy who learned how to live in the wake of what he'd done. But even peace had its shadows. One morning in June, Kenya received a letter marked Urgent State Legal Notice. Her hand shook as she opened it. Elijah stood nearby, watching the crease between her eyebrows deepen. "What is it?" She didn't answer at first. Then, softly, "Chelsea's filing a lawsuit." "For what?" Kenya looked up at her son, her voice caught between rage and disbelief. "Defamation. She says your testimony ruined her career, her life, her reputation." Elijah went cold. "But I told the truth." "I know you did," Kenya whispered, her voice hardening. "And we're not backing down." The legal process began again, different this time, but no less exhausting. Lawyers came. Depositions were taken. And through it all, Elijah felt something he hadn't in months. Anger. Not fear, not guilt, but a fierce, burning anger that this woman, who had lied and hurt a child, could somehow twist herself into a victim again. That the system, even now, could be used as a weapon against the truth. Marcus offered to help cover legal costs. So did the local community center. A pro bono civil rights firm stepped in. But even with support, Kenya knew the toll. "You still sure you want to fight?" she asked Elijah one night. He nodded. "She's hoping I'll be quiet. But that's not who I am anymore." In court, Chelsea wore beige and bitterness. Her lawyers painted Elijah as an impressionable child, easily manipulated by adults who had a political agenda. They called his testimony convenient, emotional, and unverified. When Elijah took the stand again, this time older, more poisé, didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just told the truth again. I didn't lie, he said, his voice clear. She did. And then Harper, now 9, surprised everyone by asking to testify. I remember everything, she said. I remember the bathroom, the lies, the way she used to whisper things about my dad. Chelsea's lawyer objected. The judge allowed it, and the room went still as Harper said, if Elijah hadn't spoken up, I might still think I deserved it. It was over after that. The judge dismissed the lawsuit, calling it a baseless attempt to silence a child who had the courage to tell the truth when adults failed. Chelsea's countersuit collapsed. She was ordered to pay all legal fees. She left the courtroom alone. No reporters followed her this time. No cameras waited outside. That night, Elijah stood on the roof of their building, looking out over the city. Harper joined him, barefoot, holding 2 popsicles. Strawberry or blue raspberry? Strawberry, he said. They sat in silence for a while, feet dangling over the edge, their lives stretching ahead of them like the skyline. You think she'll ever come back? Harper asked. Elijah shook his head. Maybe, but it won't matter. Why not? He smiled faintly. Because now we know who we are. July arrived with heat waves and freedom. Elijah turned 11. Marcus threw him a party with balloons and a ridiculous cake shaped like a courtroom gavel. People from the neighborhood came. The judge sent a card. Even Jasmine, the social worker, showed up with a Lego set and a warm hug. During the party, Kenya pulled her son aside. You ever think about writing your story down? For real? A book? He blinked. Like a real book? You've lived more than most adults I know, she said, squeezing his shoulder. And you've got a voice that could change more than just one courtroom. Elijah thought about it, and then he started writing. Not for the news, not for the lawyers, for himself, for Harper, for every kid sitting in silence, hoping someone might listen. The book came slowly, in bits and pieces, pages filled with drawings and dialogue, court memories and cafeteria jokes. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. The title, scrawled across the first page in black marker. The day I wasn't small anymore. By the end of summer, the community held a public reading at the library. Elijah stood in front of over 100 people, holding his little notebook like armor. He cleared his throat and began. I used to think I had to be big to be heard. That truth only counted when adults said it. But now I know. Truth is truth, no matter who says it. And sometimes the smallest voices are the ones we should have been listening to all along. The room was silent. Then someone stood, clapped, then another, and another. By the time Elijah closed the notebook, the entire room was on their feet. That night, Harper gave him a drawing she'd Medea picture of the 2 of them, standing in a courtroom surrounded by giants. Above their heads, in crayon letters, were the words, "We're louder than they thought." Years later, Elijah would still keep that drawing. He'd go on to speak at conferences, help train advocates, and write more stories. He'd grow up into someone the world couldn't ignore. But no matter how far he went, no matter how big his voice became, he never forgot the boy he used to be. The one who stood up when no one asked him to. The one who told the truth in a room full of liars. The one who changed everything. And years from now, in another courtroom, another city, another child might rise from the back, row heart pounding, fists clenched, voice shaking. And because of Elijah Monroe, that child might just be heard. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.